So today's guest will help us think about sort of, a lot about ADHD, but she also gets into stigmas. And I was recollecting sort of my own middle school childhood experience, and I was trying to think about whether I was stigmatized for anything. And I talked about it in our host episode. The biggest one that stands out is food. I brought food that looked really different from what everyone else was eating. But a funnier one, this was in elementary school. My school was uniforms only, but like a few times a year they had something called casual day where you could pay to not wear your uniform. And this was, it was like a fundraising thing that the school would do.
Okay, yeah.
And this was like a huge deal for everyone at school. It was like a fashion show. Like it was it was very important to everyone. And my mom, when I was little, would dress me, and all my classmates would come in like jeans and cute T-shirts. We're talking like 4th grade, and my mom would put me in these really frilly, flowery dresses with like white tights. I was so out of place. My mom would not yield. Like to her, I was a little lady, and this is how I needed to dress, and I was stigmatized for that.
I don't want to invalidate that, but that's so cute.
Yeah, looking back, it was cute, but at the time, it was
Is
very
that
bad.
is that a stigma?
Sure.
I feel like that was just a normal response to
Like
something strange.
Other
or that
people
was
stigmatized you.
ostracization or being ostracized. Is ostracization
I think for
a word?
sure people were like, that weird girl. It just added to me being like very weird.
I'm imagining like little Bo Peep.
It's kind of like that. I'll see if I can dig up a picture and
Yes,
share it.
please.
Yeah.
The old little Bo Peep stigma. So many have to live through
They'd
it.
only let me hang out with sheep, lambs.
Yes, if your mother had only let you hang out with sheep, it would have been better.
Well, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but
Sheep.
I am a Baha'i, and I grew up as a Baha'i. My family are all Baha'is, and growing up, I really felt embarrassed about being religious and actually like enjoying that part of my life, and having like a really strong spiritual faith element in my family. And I would hide that from a lot of my friends. And yeah, I felt like there was a lot of stigma around being religious. And I understand why, but it definitely impacted me for sure. Yeah.
No, I can
How about you,
relate to that. I think mine was when I was probably about 17. I think I just kept on waking up with like every day there would be these dots of blood in my palms. And it just became more and more. And I was bleeding. No? Are we? Oh, we're not talking about stigmata. Oh, I've grossly. I'm going to have to backtrack.
Wait, Ben, I really thought you were telling the truth. I mean, I
When
don't
I
know what
started laughing,
stigma is.
Sophie looked horrified, like, why are you shaming him? And I was like, I really hope that he's going to Satan. Like, I hope Satan is the next line. All right.
Oh, I should have done that. I should have gone. And so what I did was, yes, I'm behind now. I might be religious, but what I did was I got on my knee and I prayed to Satan.
No, Ben. I thought, so I listened to the promo of you on Sean Hayes' podcast called The Hypochondriactor.
Hypochondriactor, yeah.
Hypochondriactor. And
available on all platforms.
You tell a story about how you had to be revived as an infant, and I was so shocked by that story. You'd never told that.
Revived is, yeah.
Okay, resuscitated.
But no, that's true. I guess that's true. No, because revive sounds like a cultural
died.
revival.
Yeah,
you had to be brought to life with
Resuscitated.
music and dance.
Well, first of all, so I actually told Nava, I was like, Nava, we were talking about how Penn doesn't share much with us, and we
Is
have
that
to
really
find
true?
out stories of his life
So
from
many
other
examples.
podcasts.
Yeah.
And I told her, I texted Penn the other day that, I had heard this thing, and she just asked, did he respond? And I just wrote, guess.
Yeah.
Did I not?
No.
And then I was like, if you looked at my phone right now, if you scrolled, it's just all blue. And I look like his stalker because it's just like 5 scrolling pages of like blue, not a single gray. on my phone.
However, you get on some of our group threads. It's not always the same. Although
That's true.
group
No,
threads can
but
be
when you do decide to jump in there, you're
fun.
pretty
It's worth it.
engaging. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get to it. Our guest today is Dr. Sasha Hamdani, a board-certified psychiatrist and ADHD clinical specialist who you might have seen on social media. She's got Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and she breaks down stigmas and provides accessible information about mental health. She also founded the nonprofit worldharmonyonline.org, where she advocates for human kindness. She's the CEO of Focus Genie, which is a company behind the mobile app for focus, productivity, and ADHD education. She also authored the book Self-Care for People with ADHD, and this came out in January 2023. But most recently, she was selected to participate in the Healthcare Leaders in Social Media Roundtable, and this is at the White House. So she gave a talk alongside the vice president regarding the crisis of healthcare worker burnout. This is pretty cool. We couldn't be more interested and excited to have Sasha on the podcast today. You're going to love it. Stick around. We will be right back. Welcome to Podcrushed. We're your hosts. I'm Penn.
I'm Nava.
And I'm Sophie. And I think we would have been your middle school besties.
Mostly so you could tutor Penn and math.
I was only struggling because I was placed ahead too early.
Okay, Sasha, you before we sat down for this interview, you have shared with us just a few tidbits of your life story. You said, I was diagnosed with ADHD in 4th grade after starting a riot in my classroom.
Yeah.
And then you, from what I understand, you say that fast-tracked you into getting evaluated and treated, and then it led to, I guess, like this climactic burnout in medical school. So we're gonna get a lot of your life and the work that you do, but I just want people to know. Let's start there. 4th grade, you're starting a riot. What is that? What does that mean? I mean, a riot?
Yeah, no, a legit riot. So I, 4th grade, substitute teacher. I got, and like I'm horrified to tell you this right now, right? Because I respect what teachers do so much, especially having kids of my own. Like, God bless their profession.
Yes.
But yeah, got kids to stand up on their desks and start chanting. And I thought it was hysterical at the time. And like, literally that day, the teacher was like, no, go and get evaluated.
Wait, Sasha, what were they chanting?
I don't remember. I don't remember. And it wasn't anything mean. It was like,
so like a true sociopath, you have no recollection or remorse.
I can't. I blacked it out. It didn't bother me.
You're a villain. You're cackling.
You know what? Don't paint me into that. I was 4th grade. I was working through some stuff.
No. Of course. Yes.
I'm assuming it was compassionate because I think my parents were pretty scared at the time, right? Dealing with like this possibility of a diagnosis. And I think that the teachers probably handled an explosive situation relatively well, to the point that it got my parents to a spot where like, oh, okay, maybe there could be something medical going on. And so, yeah, my mom is a pediatrician and got me in to see one of our partners, and like, no questions about it. They were like, yep. And so I was started on medication at that point.
And was ADHD like as in the cultural lexicon as it is now? No,
oh my gosh,
right?
No. And I won't tell you how old I am, but it was a long time ago. And it wasn't on anyone's radar, both diagnostically. I think the reason it got picked up is just because I presented like what a boy would have presented. I was super hyperactive, and that was like the poster for ADHD. But I think if I had presented like a lot of females do with inattentive symptoms, just kind of daydreaming and kind of minding my own business, it wouldn't have been picked up.
Do you remember that time well? And was there like a before getting diagnosed with ADHD and an after getting diagnosed with ADHD for you?
Yes. So here's the weird thing. So yeah, it was a clear demarcation because I remember like I liked school and I was a good kid, but I struggled because I would get in trouble all the time. I would be loud, and unintentionally. I'd get excited about stuff and I'd be loud. And then once I was on medication, none of that happened. I just sailed by school. It wasn't really hard. I really started to enjoy learning. I would like do extracurricular stuff. Really, really liked it. And that just continued smooth sailing. And then I got into med school right out of high school. So then I just kind of kept doing what I was doing. And it was great. I was on this. My parents were a little bit scared about the stigma behind it.
Yeah.
And so they told me I was on a vitamin, like something to help me focus. I know. That's like the standard response.
You weren't able to call it ADHD.
I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know that was the word behind it. They were like, this is going to help you focus. This is going to help you in school. And I was like, okay. I thought it was a Flintstones vitamin. And it did. And it did. And I was like, this is great. And so I continued to take this all throughout. And then med school was the first time I was by myself, and I did not take my vitamin, and it did not go well. I just like kind of, I remember sitting in my neuro class, and like
Of all classes.
of all, yes,
Yeah.
of all classes. And I don't know if they did this, but like they would post grades by like number. And so you'd like go up
Wow.
and you'd see like the numbers. And so it would be anonymous, but like you'd go down, you're looking at numbers and you're like, oh, this one person got 32%. And that person was a fool. And then you're like, oh, that person was me. What happened? And the reason I did so, amongst many, but I wasn't taking my medication, and I literally forgot to turn over the sheet of paper. So I did the first half.
Wow.
Wow.
I don't even want to talk about this anymore.
Aw.
It was horrible. It was one of those things where like I went to my teachers afterwards and I was like, this was a stupid mistake. I'm so sorry. Let me do the test in front of you. And they were like, no, if you learn from
Wow.
this.
Mm.
It was horrible.
Wow.
So not taking your medication when you started med school, was that intentional, or it was just you didn't even realize it was something that helped you that much, and so you didn't
I thought it was a
know you needed to?
So you still didn't know you had ADHD in medical school? There's irony there.
And like it was the first time I was by myself. So I was learning how to like do stuff on my own and
Yeah.
be by myself. And so I was doing just super badly. I full on thought I had a stroke. I was like, I don't know what's happening.
Wow.
So my parents at that point were like, this isn't going anywhere good. Come home. And they told me over the phone, and I was like, I don't have ADHD. What are you talking about? And they're like, no, you do. And that vitamin that you were supposed to be taking is actually Ritalin. Like,
Wow.
so I was like,
Wow.
okay, what?
Yeah,
It
was
just-
that like almost an identity crisis or
It
or
was-
something like that?
I think so. To be honest with you, like I've thought a lot about this because initially at that moment in time, I felt very betrayed. I was like, I felt like I was being like drugged to perform, and like I didn't understand why they wouldn't have explained it to me.
Mm.
And I think later, once we got past that, because it took me a while to get through that. Because then after that, I was like, I'm not going to take medication. Like, I don't think I have this. There's no way. And it took me a while to kind of navigate through that. And then I got to a spot where like I actually had a conversation with them, and I was like, what was your thought process? And they were just like, we didn't understand it. We didn't know how to explain it to you. And we didn't want you to feel like this was like a huge stigmatized thing, because at the time, like for like just general population, it was super stigmatized. I think to some degree it is still stigmatized, but we're talking about it more. But it was very, very stigmatized then. And it was something that people only thought of in boys and traumatized boys. And so they were like, I had no idea how to explain that to you. And we should have done it better. We should have like learned about it and how to explain it. But we didn't know. And I was like, okay.
I always associate Adderall with ADHD, but you said you were on Ritalin. So could you share just a little bit the difference between the two, and if there are withdrawal symptoms from someone who gets off?
Yeah, so Adderall and Ritalin are both neurostimulants. So they are highly stimulating agents by releasing norepinephrine into the brain. Now, how they do that is just different mechanisms, but they both basically do the same thing. Okay. So they're releasing norepinephrine into the cleft so you have more of it usable. And that's kind of at its base what ADHD is a dopamine and norepinephrine dysregulation issue. You have enough of it, it's just not being utilized in the right spot. So that's why you get some hyperactivity and you get some inattention and difficulty regulating energy. Everything becomes a regulation issue, including emotions.
And are there withdrawal
Sorry.
symptoms?
Hey, oh.
When people get off, is there any kind of withdrawal or sort of side effect of getting off typically?
So when we talk about the clinical sense of withdrawal, like with a stimulant, there is withdrawal in terms of your brain is used to a level of stimulation. And then when you are coming off of it, you have this physiological withdrawal, but it's short-lived, right?
Okay.
Because the stimulant, even the long-acting ones, aren't in your system for days and days and days. But it's, in my experience, I would say, and what I've seen clinically, it's significant enough when people get off of this medication because of the lifestyle change and because of how your brain is functioning. So you feel like you can do less.
So you've given us a little bit of a window into your home life, like the way your parents were trying to actually, I think quite kindly, like not make you feel like you have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
But first, because this is a show where we go back to earlier phases of life, and this will help set the scene.
Got it.
Yeah, just like, what was your home life growing up? I know that you grew up first generation
Yeah.
Pakistani, is that right?
Yes.
And Muslim, or at least your
Yes.
parents are Muslim. I don't know now
Yeah.
for you, but
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I grew up in Santa Barbara. So like this super affluent, super white city.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like my parents immigrated from Pakistan and like just totally by just dumb luck ended up in Santa Barbara. Like that's the first
Wow.
place my dad got a job and they're like, sweet, this is great. So we ended up there and I think just growing up in that kind of community, which was wonderful and awesome, but still it made you feel like an outsider because I was. I mean, I didn't see another person of like any sort of minority till about fourth grade
Wow.
outside of my family, but like in the school setting, which is weird. Weird.
Yeah.
Like, so then it was one of those things that foundationally, I think that's part of the reason my parents were so careful about how they approach things with me because I already felt really different. And I felt kind of at that young age, like, okay, I'm different, so I got to do things a little bit differently. So when I realized that I was a little bit louder than normal and I was getting in trouble more, I'm like, okay, this is my role. I'm going to be like the class clown. This is it. And so that kind of, did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, your
Yeah,
answer.
no, this is
great.
Your answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is really helpful context.
Yeah.
I feel like
Got
even
lost
that
halfway
connection
through.
that you just made now of like possibly the reason that your parents hid your diagnosis from you or kept it from you was in an effort to protect you and not further
Yeah.
ostracize you when you were already kind of an outsider in your community growing up. So I think that's really helpful to
Yeah.
know.
We'd love to
Yeah.
hear more, please.
And I think that I just being that kind of sensitive kid who felt like on the outside, I also, when I grew and, learned about ADHD, things also kind of made sense about why my parents thought that that was a good idea. And like having kids of my own, understanding how difficult it is to broach certain things, I can understand trepidation around that and talking about ADHD, talking about marginalized populations, talking about feeling different. But I think that where myself and my parents have gotten to at this point in time is how important that communication is, right? It's like I wish we had had better communication and dialogue throughout that process.
Yeah.
Sasha, Penn mentioned that we have a little prep on you, and one thing that you shared, which I thought was so funny, and it is kind of a sharp left, but I want to ask you about this. You said, I played water polo in high school and was terrible. I was ejected my second game of the year for biting someone because I thought I was drowning. And I want to know, what is the correlation between biting and drowning?
Oh, it's pretty clear. It's in the amygdala. And listen, no, you can pick it up here, right?
Are you
Dr. Badgley?
First of all, that was more for personal color for you guys, but okay, I will go into this.
No, it's a good story.
She's like, why would you bring that up on the podcast?
Okay. So I was in water polo. I had no interest in water polo
So why were you in water polo?
because I was so bad at swim that they're like, you have to work on this
But
off
wait.
season.
But wait, isn't water polo harder than swim?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So they were like, you need to prepare for swim by being in water polo.
Was that the school who said that or your parents?
No, the school. The school was like, okay, if you want to be in swim, which we don't want you to be in either, because I just hid my parka the whole time and I was like, please, no one call on me to swim or do anything.
Yeah.
But when they were like, you're so bad, you have to do like this off season also.
Okay.
And I hated it. I couldn't get my hair into swim caps. It was like
Yeah.
a cone head. I didn't like the little caps. It was all awful. Anyway, so I when I went in to play certain games, I think I played like one season, and there was, I'm not even kidding, like I was in 9th grade. This girl was like built like a full-grown woman, like a just huge woman, like so, like just muscle and woman, just huge, and was pulling me. You're looking at me like you're not believing me.
No,
I'm telling you, this is what's
this
happening.
This is do I have disbelief face?
Yeah, you do.
Hey, Sasha, that's just his
This is-
face.
Okay, are you invested?
Yeah.
Pulling me underwater. So I'm like gasping for breath.
And that's
no one
typical,
is,
right? In water polo, they play pretty dirty, right?
I mean, I guess. And she had like really sharp nails. Like afterwards, when I got out of the thing, she had shredded my bathing suit.
Oh my goodness.
So basically, she's pulling you down.
She's pulling me down.
And
I'm
you're
like
in pain.
swallowing water.
You're bleeding into the water, and there might be sharks.
Yes, all of that.
And then you basically just like you
And
bite
it's
her
on the
so you can get.
shoulder.
You're
Yeah,
in
I was
remedial
like-
swimming already.
I'm like trying to egg beat her. She's like sitting on top of me at this point. So I'm like getting out bitter, just like get off my case for a second. I get called on it. I get kicked out of the game. And so I'm like embarrassed that I'm out of the game. I'm naked because my suit's falling off.
That's crazy.
And then my mom, again, the pediatrician, took care of that girl and I had to go apologize to her.
Oh
Wow.
wow.
I'm actually glad I asked you because for some reason in my mind when I read that I was like she thought she was drowning and to stop drowning she needed to find someone to bite. Like I was like couldn't put it together, but this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I
Not
was
bitter.
more in that camp as well. I thought like it was, I don't know. It seemed like you were putting it all on you in the story, but
This
this
wasn't
is
a
like
story
this is
for
a-
This was like a
Right.
survival. This was a survival tactic.
We made it a story.
Sasha, just as, on an aside, wait, last week I was at a dance class where this girl kept cutting me off and
Did you bite her?
and I think I'm gonna bite her if she does it again.
I'm telling you, you may get ejected, but it's extremely effective.
Yeah.
Bite everybody. Your mom will make you apologize to her, though.
Yeah.
So sticking in that time of middle school, I wanted to know what were your first experiences, Sasha, around love and heartbreak in that time?
So, I will tell you that around that time, I was prone to crushes like you would not believe. Like,
Mhm.
I would get my heart broken every other week because I would just, I know, it's so sad, but I was kind of awkward. I was, already had that kind of complex that I was different. And I would just love so hard on people. And so I got to the point where it was getting to a spot where throughout that's middle and medical school. Then kind of continued into medical school where like it wasn't, I would get into these situations where I would have big crushes. I would get my heart broken. And I feel like that, developed my personality into like kind of, I don't know. And I talked about this before, kind of being the class clown, but I kind of did that. I was just like, okay, if I'm not going to be the girl that every dude is going to fall in love with, I'm going to be the funny girl. I'm going to be the
Yeah.
best friend. I'm going to be, and that actually suited me really well. I was happy in that role for a long time until it stopped working.
Wait, when did it stop working?
I feel like it stopped working when I got into a spot where I was like, I think I do want a relationship. And then realized I was just like woefully unprepared because I was like, I never let myself be vulnerable after medical.
After
it's
medical
a
school.
really hard
There's
word.
gotta be
Middle.
some connection there.
Middle school, I just kind of didn't want to go down that road anymore because I got stomped on. So I'm
Yeah, it was
no
like a form
thanks.
of protection. sounds like.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't really want to do that. And then when I realized I do want to have relationships, it was just like a very steep learning curve. I was like, oh, this is how we're doing it. This is awful. Okay. And then it just took a while to kind of figure out how to be vulnerable in a way that I could learn from it instead of just demolishing me. And that took a while.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about a time that you're still quite young. Like you're like high school you're learning this or medical school you're learning this?
It was medical school.
Okay.
Well, my medical school was really like I started medical school when I was 18.
Okay.
Wow.
Is that uncommon?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, that's uncommon, right?
Yeah.
Because you start usually after you've been in
After
university.
undergrad.
Oh, after undergrad. Usually after so you started
Yeah.
4 years early.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, all right. I'm just really curious because now you study ADHD.
Yeah.
And I just really want to know, like, you've lived through it,
Yeah.
you've studied it now for a while. How do you now see this? Like, where does it come from, and how does it manifest as your? Because so you kind of went from like heartbreak to heartbreak to heartbreak to heartbreak.
Yeah.
In middle school, which I'm not saying is ADHD, but I'm saying all these underlying kind of parts of you.
Yeah.
Right? They all kind of are one thing in a way.
Right.
So you think quickly, you love quickly, you're moving quickly, you're just
Everything's
right.
fast. Yeah.
And so I don't know, like at what point did you start looking at yourself and you're like, I want to know more about this?
Honestly, from the time my parents told me.
Okay.
So like initially I was in that spot where I was like in total disbelief. I was like, there's no way. And then I was like, I'm going to focus as much as I can. And I still couldn't do it. Like I was still falling behind. I was still like, things were just so much harder than they were for my peers. I was watching them sail by without any sort of difficulty. And I was like, okay, this wasn't my issue in like high school. So why is this so hard now?
Mm-hmm.
And so then my parents, what I felt like they did really well is my dad was just like, you know what? Just come home and you don't even have to worry about this next test. Don't study for this next test. Focus on ADHD. Learn everything you can about it. So he like took me.
And you're how old now? Like
19. Yeah. So he like, we were on Google together. He's like, let's go to the library. We went to the library. We were looking and searching and trying to find answers and looking for something that looked like my brain. And by the end of that, I think I spent like 5 or 6 days doing that. And like, and my dad and I were like playing off each other. And I'm like, Dad, did you know about this? And he's like, oh yeah, and look at what I read about this. And it became this like immersive experience where I think a lot of the shame part of it went away. And I was like, oh, this is medical. But there's some incredible parts where your brain is moving fast and has all this possibility of like wonderful things. Like you just have to learn how to optimize it. My dad's an engineer and he's all about like optimizing efficiency. So he's like, we just have to harness this. We can make this work better. And I was like, okay, let's do this.
That's amazing.
So I think that was just such a wonderful, number one, total bonding with my dad, which I
yeah,
doubt.
sounds really nice.
It was great. It was great. But it was also just like a very, I think it got me to a spot. It was like a little crash course in ADHD where I began to see this as this multifaceted thing that wasn't what was wrong with me, but just like a part of me that could be utilized and explained and like I got to enjoy parts of it after that experience.
I feel like that's so inspiring and just like amazing parenting. Like congratulations to your dad.
A+ parenting.
Yeah.
A+.
I just feel like there's so many applications of that. That's so cool.
He pivoted.
Yeah.
He had previously made this decision that personally, as someone who was a special ed educator, I would question that decision to like not share with your child or to create a culture of like secrecy around a diagnosis. But then he pivoted when new information came to light and when, you came to him. So I think that's really cool. Like the fact that you can change your mind,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that also that fell on like we were learning more about ADHD and it was also less stigmatized. And I think that everything all came together and worked out at the right time. I think that like it was hard for me in the beginning, but I think having that just like little pocket of time with my dad to learn about ADHD, it changed all of it to me because I was like, I can work with this. This isn't this is doable.
Mm-hmm.
I can deal with this, which is nice. He gave that to me.
It's beautiful.
And it's what you've
Sasha,
done.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is.
I want to talk now about what you've done. So you have a book that you've just published. You have this website. You have an app. I mean, you've spoken with the vice president. You've done so many incredible things. You're thriving, and I want to know sort of how you got there. I mean, we've heard a little bit of it, but how you got there and sort of what you're doing now that you're the most excited about.
I don't know how I got there. I don't know. I think that a lot of those doors opened up to me because of social media. And so around 2020, I just had my son, and I was super bored because I was like, there's nothing to do with an infant. You're so little. And like, I just had a lot of time to myself. And so I was doing telehealth at that time with patients, and they would hold up their phone to the camera and be like, this is why I have ADHD. And I'm like, oh, that's dumb. That's not a thing. That's not a real reason. So then I was like, okay, there's a lot of bad stuff and bad information on social media.
Oh, so to clarify, they were holding up their phone with like some kind of...
Like a TikTok video.
Okay, I thought they were holding up their phone like, the phone is why I have ADHD.
I mean, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
So I initially started putting out content to counter some of that information. And then, like everybody in the history of the world, you just get kind of sucked into that.
Yeah.
And so I started creating more. And then I started gaining traction. And then I had Simon & Schuster reach out about writing a book. And so I did, which was weird. It was hard. It was hard to keep organized. But I wrote a book about self-care with ADHD, which was like everything that I wish someone had told me in medical school, if you will. But I wish that, so it's not just like, it's like, how does your brain work? How is this different? What can you do to optimize? And so like, there's so much that I was calling my dad, and I was like, do you remember when we talked about this? And he's like, yeah, put it in the book. And so there was that came out, and then people were really excited about that. And then I was like, I just wish there was a better way of getting information out to people about, just ADHD and how to optimize your brain and actual usable productivity tools. And that's when I started creating Focus Genie, which is the mobile app, which is kind of like Duolingo, but for ADHD. And that's what I'm most excited about. So that's just, it's little educational Instagram swipe through kind of things where you can learn about ADHD. It's usable productivity tools. It's gamified, so it's interesting and engaging. And it's been impossibly difficult to do. Making an app is so hard.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so boring and so hard. But it's like, but I'm working with a great development firm to kind of get this. And my sister, who's like, her brain, I don't even understand how her brain works. Her brain works like in a grid, which is the exact opposite how my brain works. And she is working with me, and she came on. And so we've just been doing this together. So it's been just like good bonding. It's been fun.
A lot of family bonding.
Congratulations.
Oh yeah,
Through
we
this.
bond hard.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Nava mentioned that you got to talk with the vice president and present with the vice president.
Yeah.
I can imagine that was nerve-wracking, probably. How do you think having ADHD impacts how you prepare for something like that, whether it's that or some other kind of like big presentation?
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
It probably helps
Mm.
because your brain moves so fast that I feel like getting prepared for those things, if you're truly interested in something like this, like I was so interested and engaged in this podcast that you can just dive in and get a whole bunch of information and deep dive, and you just like keep going down these rabbit holes, and you get a huge amount of information in a small period of time. And so if there's something that really excites me or inspires me, just like when I was talking about healthcare burnout with the vice president, stuff like that, that was easy because they gave me 2 days to prep with all the vetting and all the stuff. They were like, I'm not sure if you're going to go. And then 2 days before, they're like, okay, book a plane. And I was like, oh.
Wow.
And I showed up. And it was fine. It was good. To be totally honest with you, it was wonderful. And it was like very incredible to be around those. But to be totally real with you, I kind of felt like I was just like acting a role. Like we had
I
to do
have
a
no idea what
hospital
that's
tour. I'm sorry. This was, well, I'll give you an example. So we had to do this hospital tour, and I had to practice with like stand-ins for the vice president and surgeon general like 50 times. Like I was walking.
Do they look like them?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, carry on. Sorry. I was just curious.
We had to walk around. And during that time, it was all for like, when we turn this corner, the camera is going to be on this side, so you need to be on the left of the vice president.
Yeah, right.
When we go over here, you need to step out of the way because there's going to be a zooming camera and they need both of your faces. And I was like, like I'm not super good at rights and lefts anyway, so this was like so much to deal with here. And so it was just like, I felt like a lot of it was, it was incredible and wonderful. And I'm so thankful for that experience. But at the same time, it just wasn't what I thought it would be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that sounds consistent with, going into that level of, what would you call that? It's not even politics. What is that?
Something else.
You're in the power center.
I don't know, but I had this talk. It was like a big deal. And then right after the talk, I had to interview them for social media stuff. So I'm interviewing them. They were like, okay, well, we have to go back into like your hold room. They were saying that to the vice president. And then like some security guard just picks me up off of the ground and like moves me over, and I was like, I can walk.
Did you bite him? You just reflex. You're like, I've been here before. I know what this is.
I'm not ready to laugh about that. No, I didn't bite him. I should have.
Okay, I have the most
He was
random
humongous.
question, Sasha, but I keep thinking it, so I'm just going to ask. Does Kamala Harris smell really good? She seems like she would smell amazing.
So here's the deal. When I did this, it was like peak COVID.
You lost your sense of smell.
No, I didn't. Don't put that out there. I didn't. I didn't expose anybody. No, but we all had to wear masks, so I don't know.
Makes sense.
Ah,
okay,
yeah.
I don't know why I
can't
wanted
give
to
you
know
a
that.
reasonable
But
answer.
That's
If
so
it helps,
interesting.
I think she looks like she smells good.
That
Yeah,
she
right.
does. She looks like she smells amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
there's that.
Honestly, I feel like we could talk for 2 hours about ADHD because
Let's do it.
I don't know that much. We've actually talked a little bit about it on this show. We had another guest, Victoria Pedretti.
I know.
Okay, so
I saw that. I commented on that video.
I mean, you know a lot about this, far more than we do, so I don't know where to start, but there are these gender dimensions of ADHD. Like it manifests differently in boys and girls.
So males get diagnosed 3 times more likely than
Wow.
females. 3 to 4 times more likely. So
Wow.
pretty significantly more.
Do we understand why?
Are they not 3 to 4 times more likely to have it? They just get diagnosed more?
It's just they get diagnosed more.
Wow.
And so there's not like, it's hard because you don't really know the number of undiagnosed people. So it's hard to
Yeah.
get a good statistic on that.
Right.
But in terms of why, I think it's because they present as hyperactive. There's the ones disrupting classes. There's
Starting riots.
starting riots. Yes. They typically, when you look at a presentation of an inattentive type, you're getting a lot of internally focused symptoms. So inattentiveness, difficulty organizing things. They might have a difficulty with losing things. And, you're having a lot of just internal stuff that's bothering you significantly, making your life more difficult. But it's not like you're ruining a class or, you're not making things absolutely intolerable for everybody else so that you
for
generally get
yourself.
past there just for yourself. Yeah. So that's kind of like a little bit about the gender stuff. Now, in terms of just ADHD in general and the metamorphosis of just how it's been changing, how it's been viewed by the public, I think that in terms of validity of diagnosis, I'm biased. I think it's pretty valid because I
Sure. Yeah,
feel like it is my diagnosis and it's what I have poured a lot of myself into. But I think that there's also, with a lot of people who have done work in this area, they've been looking into how does trauma affect ADHD? How does trauma affect other mental health diagnoses and things like that? And I think there is some validity to that. Trauma absolutely worsens everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Trauma being a wound, I think that's important in terms of like real significant thing that shapes how you move forward. So yeah, if you're looking at trauma in that context affecting everything, I think it absolutely affects how your ADHD presents. Now, what I would say and where I disagree and differ a little bit is I think that it truly does come from a genetic basis. And I think that it's being passed on from family to family, generation to generation. And so I think there is a genetic predisposition to that I don't think is explained by trauma. I think trauma can make it worse, but I think this is something you're probably born with.
And epigenetics might be the bridge, right? Because they say with epigenetics, like trauma is passed down for 7 generations. So like, who knows? You know, we're
Who
like
knows?
the first
And isn't-
person.
I
Yeah.
feel like I tried to spell epigenetics on a word processor in the last couple of years, and it did not. There was no version of it that was correct. So
That's true.
I was thinking to myself, like, is this a word that is not yet in this outdated word
Lexicon.
processor's dictionary? Like, because epigenetics is not an old.
But
field.
isn't it?
No.
Is it
Right.
Is it something that people disagree on? Like some
Yeah, that's
people
the kind of what
believe
I'm
in it, some
asking,
people
like-
don't. No,
I don't know
That's what I
enough
thought.
about the controversy behind epigenetics.
Okay,
Guys,
let's start
Sasha
one.
was a
Yeah.
master spelling bee player. I don't know what to say.
I
And I
really
really thought
am.
that Penn was using that as a segue to ask. I was like, wow, that is some like fine crafting to.
I know, yeah.
ask
Well, let's
Sasha
do it.
about
Let's do it.
spelling
Spelling
bees.
bees. I like it. It's a good segue. Yeah, I'm really good at spelling.
Sasha, I want to ask you a bonus question.
Bonus question.
I just want to know what was the hardest word you had to spell in your middle school spelling bee?
So the word I messed up on is chamois. Do you know how to spell chamois?
Chamois, is it not?
Do I
just
know?
the
Can you use it in a
one?
sentence?
No,
use it in
it's
a sentence.
not.
What is chamois?
Sorry.
Is it like a ShamWow? Are we talking about what's a chamois?
It's like a ShamWow.
It's
It
not
is
even
a
a
ShamWow.
word. Is that a word?
Oh, it's a word.
That's not fair to you.
It is
the
like a rough, or it's like a soft suede thing used
Oh,
for
yeah.
wiping.
Okay, wait. Is it
They use that in pottery.
SCHAMMY?
No,
It's IE at the end, right?
no.
What?
It's OIS at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Oh, that's right.
CHAMOIS. I'll use it in a sentence for you. No, I'm just kidding.
And do you know why I messed it up? You would get this like booklet of words that they could potentially use. And so my mom would go through it every, like when we were preparing at nighttime. And she pronounced that word, chamois, the entire
that's
time.
how I would pronounce it too.
Yeah, you're like the French, chamois.
Chamois. And so like then they said chamois. I was like, what the shit is that? What is that? I don't know what that is.
At that age, did you say to your mother in bed, "What the shit is that?" Mom, what the shit is that? And she's like, "Gotta give this girl more magic medicine. We gotta get her more." She's swearing at us
Get
in
her the
bed.
Flintstone vitamin.
I do want to ask you one more question about ADHD.
Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned that part of why your family might have like hidden that diagnosis has to do with stigmas.
Yeah.
And Penn had sort of entered that by saying that it's more in the lexicon today. So I wanted to ask from your perspective and what you've seen, is there less of a stigma? Could we go further in eliminating the stigma? And if so, how can we do that? How can we support people as family members, as community members, as teachers who get that diagnosis? Like,
Yeah. I think there's for sure still a stigma. I think there's less. And I think that as we talk about it and expand these conversations a little bit more, I think every time we do that, we help reduce stigma. There is a uniqueness that comes from ADHD that makes your brain work in a different way. And I think that can be very poorly understood, and it can be misconstrued as you're being lazy, you're being reckless, you're being thoughtless, you're being, it's all these volitional components that you're not. But I think once you start to learn and explore more about ADHD and the basis and how your brain actually works, it helps reduce stigma.
If you could go back to your 12, 13-year-old self,
Yeah.
grappling with this relatively new information.
Yeah.
Or, no,
I
you
wouldn't have
weren't.
known
You
yet.
weren't.
Taking
You weren't,
new
but you were
vitamins.
fixed. You were fixed by the magic medicine.
Oh, yeah.
By your little
was
Flintstone
great.
vitamin. So you were sharp here. You
Yeah.
were sharp.
I was on it.
What would you go back and say?
Yeah. So I thought about this question because, again, I wasn't kidding. I deep dived into all these podcast episodes and I love them. And so I knew about this final question. I think what I would say is that I would remind myself that time progresses forward. Because I think like in medical
school.
It had to happen one
We're
more
gonna
time.
make a shirt with this, Sasha. This will be like a collaboration.
Oh, my God.
Has this ever happened before?
Literally no. I don't know. There's something about your face that makes me want to say medical. So
Fair. That's one I've not heard.
Is that a compliment? Insult?
yeah, maybe.
I'm not sure that is common. That's obtuse, that one.
It's a weird one. I think when you're in that period of time, you just get so fixated on like, things are never going to change. I'm going to feel this way forever. Nothing's going to get better. Everyone's going to remember this embarrassing moment for the rest of my life. And I think that if I had understood and contextualized that, no, time is going to keep moving. People are going to change. You're going to change. Priorities are going to shift. That everything is going to get a little bit easier. And that acute pain and discomfort that you feel will get better just simply by time moving on. I wish that I had I think my parents did a pretty good job. They were a little bit confused by me in middle school. But like I wish that every middle schooler knew that in terms of just like, it's hard. That time is hard. You're weird looking. People are mean. It's just like, it's weird and it's a hard time. And so time just goes on. Just rely on that because things are going to get better even if you think they're not.